This video is going to watch quarterfinals of the 2014 TOC between Kymn and Prasad. This is going to be a fast theory debate, so it'll be good practice for flowing a fast theory debate, and additionally will be excellent practice for discussing strategy on technical theory debates. So, as always, we will have comments after every speech and after every cross-examination, where we will analyze perceptual dominance, technical skill, and the substantive arguments in that debate round. And as the debate gets further and further into the round, we will also analyze the strategic value of what the last speech just did and what the next speech should ideally do. One second, let me. Sorry about that. I just got interrupted by my mother.
Did you restart the recording?
Yeah, it started. I just got berated about gas, but no matter. We're going to start the round now, and yeah, follow along, and let's see how this round goes.
Okay, here we go. I value round of the standards maximize effect will be one actor specific. The collect actor self turns not the only acting with result policy must have actor effect will be Waller in 97. Policies must be justified by justice stop to any moral principle. Public policy never to stress and policy just how bare public policy by winners and losers to policy to the advantage of society. James Buckley Spencer practically one penny factor against the problem. Thus you reject autonomy and freedom protecting the paralyzed act about the weight of chairs and involved in decision involving opportunity cost opportunity will always be violated. Waller it against existence cycle it's not just proving to have the reason exists for the pattern of general consistency. Overall maximally to be also within later rather than second is epistemology, non-facts these are epistemic will happen now. Any non-natural humanity is metaphysical difficult, all physical factors are strange natural cause moral facts how to positive moral facts are needed to happen through physical world knowledge is based on what's needed by physical process involving a sense of cognitive existence. Moral facts not physical to hard to knowledge, but that convinces to maximize expect well-being actions that good just throughout the life form, but yet the life form cleans the standard of evaluation for good outcome by objects satisfied standards no action that you have to satisfy form just like no action for dog for like this is only true for life form for better doesn't ensure standard no action performs satisfies the standard via the form of species must act in accordance with the directions which maximize life. Plan tech the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and Pakistan will significantly limit the extraction of minerals in line with the relevant provisions of the global witness promotes amendments to the 2013 mining law funding for normal means are reserved to clarify they right. One, a prohibition on non-group for mining local compensation. Second, the law was under clear criteria for eligibility of equal treatment for all companies. Third, the law should require all mining to be paid in a single transparent account. Fourth, the law requires the private state projects community development. Fifth, the law requires the by local community mining areas. Sixth, community monitoring or community monitoring could be enforced through dividing and ensuring environmental social plans for property development. Seventh, the laws article of the resettlement and damage to the land. Harms and successful unconstrained research actions cause Afghan instability, supercharged corruption, local conflict, empirically based on 13. Afghanistan's natural resources could be exacerbate corruption, becoming an episode of violent conflict. Afghanistan must cost $1 trillion, public $74 billion a year, and 20 public sector by less than $150 million. There are signs that the competition from natural resources spill over to fighting fights over corruption, designs over provincial leaders and research rich areas. New natural resources are being used to prevent insurgent groups, large operation of what is growing instability. This also proves unique as Afghanistan is able to propose 2024 transition, but implementation research act policy imposed really shortly after. Inherency, Afghan mining law stable to solve the problem now political barriers prevent passage of emergency. 14. Afghan officials raised concern over sailing increase in mining costs, failed to pass mining laws of declining investment. The Afghan Ministry of Mines Control said the delay was caused by foreign companies completely draw funds. A dissolvency. Protection of community waterlands key when it leads to local population plan. Provide civil oversight regulations. Brown and Blankenship 13 mining. Often affect water generate toxic waste through farming. The environmental impact assessment mining companies adhere to best practices in interstate environmental protection include payments for relocation for local communities, foreign participation of local population and civil society, especially using public voting future confident international communities support governments and access environmental impacts and improve enforcement and focusing on local communities is the strongest link to access but essentially superior to economy 12. Afghanistan will not be able to research-based economy support of local applicants, security, and keeping analytical affairs backed by neglect, regions here consider politics and government principles and sector socio-economic development areas surrounded by minus security today, minus tax profit growth, and targeting non-state actors which act middle source, cycle bugs and cause crippling instability, Lahani 13 attract activities, generate conflict, failure to settle and deepens life with competency, emerging current cycles of violence, final exploitation, starting contributing criminal acts and activities of violence as led to 2005 80% of Afghan mines for control act, armed non-state acts, communities for displaced that affect controlling the waterless, existence local communities has been exacerbated, in disputes over actions other than one are crucially started creating conflict life and failure to extract sex factor, develop straight contested lead, the negative mining operations can be power maximum line allegiance deal with law and groups and government arbitration land disputes scheme policy people government legitimacy section 12 the ecological consideration detailed as natural resource conflicts by asserting public stewardship over resource and should not the provincial government declared land by the government conflict over tax minerals authorities use ecological concerns but affairs of bars several conflict for resources and unilateral appropriation of mining competition legitimacy self factor condition Cobble Valley 12 with impending data parts data in 24 that's the problem concern might also be fuel for conflict health factor more survivors of oversight context of word on mindset out of the state's goal doing the insurgency that's the six road research program where the steps to be safe to build a functioning mining economy. Advantage one is nuclear terrorism. Afghanistan is supposed to demonstrate with Pakistan has nuclear terrorism. U.S. Russia, U.S. war military 12. Afghanistan strikes back and split into one still class return Taliban can stay with Pakistan state Philippines lost control of two weapons insurgency in Afghanistan Pakistan are linked to the Taliban or take over Philippines since Pakistan insurgency sort of collapse increasing into a for arbitration to steal a nuclear weapon and it has the illegal cross-border terrorism to B12. Afghanistan Muslim search for the area contain large mineral deposits of criminal mining activities through specialized extraction and conversion has failed to prevent the Afghan government faces growth, threatening the direction of corrupt leads, prevalence of the abuse operations who have fast and Haqqani air security forces face multiple different threats that do some arms Haqqani air TPP has sold to large criminal networks and resource extraction. It's with population drive extraction happens too late to generate mineral wealth. Rebuttal 12. The Afghan government victory slaughter taking aim the Chinese victim miners have turned to the Taliban in shortage of coal exploited alienated population. People have noticed that they joined the Taliban when the government doesn't help them and instability even extraction figures are practically for part of protection money share out. In 14, expectation Afghans been overserved by most groups that enhance the Taliban government and United States take second trends in decades of violent competition. Taliban provide governments the areas that they can't control. There's a practical exploitation of minerals. They might have to bounce out of struggle control energy cause extinction of Morgan 09. They set up a nuclear stage. All just have to take one on nuclear bomb exploded because of Russian detonators where to reach nuclear command for the chemical powers any attack in the United States. Israel would have all up in Muslim states, Russian and European states. Russia would retaliate the United States. China would involve tens of thousands of nuclear warheads. Would wait from the northern hemisphere ready to generate a nuclear weapon that lasts 100 years. Like the vaccination is cycling, using nuclear strategy and advantage to Indo-Pak war. Any Pakistan to break the war, yes, control post which will cause the flood of insurgents to capture Daniel and McBonney 13 Pakistan. If single star referring to getting more than next year. A cross-border ambush suggests the new campaign may already be underway. Given the back in the military store tax intelligence tensions are bound to spill over. They work to be roughly impacting over Afghanistan and decrease Afghan will cause Indo-Pak war forces association provide vital strategic agents overdorm. A4 and 14. Quickly section 13 attacks and divide for influence forever could develop forces could when you especially influence Afghans from the Balkan field life after Indian insurgents in Pakistan, Indian fields, research transcending so Kashmir and Afghan to Lisbon and Sino-Indian and Pakistan English and Shiraz and 14 Afghanistan states have changed to China not to speak out the broader peace play the relationship and unfortunate question is the role of Pakistan and Afghan armies of large attack any religious did argument about a new line of transport to or Pakistan would dominate peace influence Kabul not to be in Rupert 12. India's proposing that African big foreign vessel 11 was an iron mine seeking position itself as rival to China and sexual not its kind of heavily group. Unique powers of the Indian train of African troops for Pakistan and Indian growing locations they threat Pakistan back African troops within Indian Pakistan conflict goes nuclear causes back and Charmel Pakistan like they do you speak weapons against Indian veterans who are growing Indian wins the nuclear program and has doubled on the jet Pakistan structural trying to multiply India's attack on giving its nuclear technology for defense air security over Pakistan. Okay. Didn't read the 2 minutes at the bottom. Okay.
Okay, so first let's talk about that speech technically. Ram is obviously super clear. He's also very fast. He's deceptively fast.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't sound fast, but he's getting through arguments really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
My flow is honestly awful.
My flow is pretty good until it gets to the second advantage. Second advantage, I didn't catch a lot of author names, but I caught a lot of tags.
I see.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because I'm bad at flowing compared to you.
I honestly think you're better than me at flowing.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't follow this AF very well, though. I think had he slowed down on tags a little bit and slowed down on the plan text, it would have significantly aided my ability to follow this AF.
I think his plan text was slow enough. Like Afghanistan, Pakistan should limit. Like I didn't get all of it, but I just know that Afghanistan, Pakistan should limit resource extraction and funding through normal means. Like,
I thought it was only Afghanistan.
Oh, really? I'm pretty sure there's Pakistan in there because like there's Indo-Pak war, first.
Right,
advantage.
but that's about spillover.
But the first advantage is like independently Pakistan leads to terror. That was one of the taglines I caught.
I see.
I'm
okay.
pretty
well,
sure. Yeah.
That will be clarified. So technically, I think Rom could have helped us flow better. But
I think definitely like slowing after the tags to like allow for author names. I missed a lot of author names.
Sure. So this is a great contrast between Danny and Rom, right?
Sure.
Danny made it a point to help us understand the taglines when he was spreading, and Rom really didn't.
Sure, yeah.
Now, if you also noticed and caught it, there was a judge who kept saying slow.
Right.
And so either Rom has consciously made the decision to go for 2 judges over that person and just go for the split panel, or Rom just presumes that person will fill in their flow in the later speeches and not make a big deal out of it, right?
Yeah, because like I feel like he went slower a little, then like just got back to 100% speed.
Yeah. I'm not even sure this is Rom's 100% speed. I think Rom probably could have been a little bit faster than this if he really wanted to. But bottom line is, it's not the easiest AF to follow along with, even though he's super clear and he enunciates words, right? So at a certain point, if you're so fast, you need to do something to help your judge in the process.
Yeah.
So my recommendation to him would have been to cut out one card from the case
Go a
and
little slower.
to use that time to slow down on taglines and card names.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. So now let's talk about this AF substantively. In terms of the structure of the AF, the first thing that I notice is that there's nothing theoretically.
Yeah. Exactly.
It makes zero theoretical claims, which is interesting, right? Because most AFs usually include something in terms of theory. We saw Bob Overing include presume AF and an interp at the bottom of his AC. We saw Danny include theories in RVI at the bottom of his AC. We saw Bob read AFC versus Reagan in one of his ACs. We saw what other rounds have we seen? We saw. Are those it?
Danny also included something, right?
Yeah, I don't think Ben read any theory against me either.
Sure.
So there's two schools of thoughts here, right? There's really three. One is that you heavily justify your AF theoretically if it's a plan. Second is that you only justify the paradigm issues or you justify the burdens or things like that. And third is you do nothing.
Okay.
Now, the advantage to the third one is it sort of leaves the negative blind as to what the AF thinks a fair debate will be.
Sure.
And so it allows a ton of room for 1AR restart, right? And so the 1AR can basically argue anything theoretically because the 1AC didn't commit to anything.
Right.
So presumably he's expecting Chris to read theory.
But that's also a double-edged sword because you have to be really fast in the 1AR to get through the paradigm issues, which Rom is, so he can
Right.
exploit that.
It is a double-edged sword. Not only do you have to be really fast, but you have to make sure you don't drop anything the one end did. So even if you're super fast, it is a double-edged sword. Additionally, it becomes a problem with the judges' flows, right? The faster you are on a very technical line-by-line debate, the more likely it is that your judge won't have anything.
Yeah.
But now the question becomes, had Brom included theory in this app, what would that have looked like? It could have been justifications for reading this app, right? If you thought that Chris was going to read T against the app. It could have been spec good, right? It could have been something like AFC to put a limit on how the negative may go about arguing against this app.
But he probably knows that Chris is going to engage him in the util debate, so he was like, yeah, probably don't need AFC in this round.
Well, it's interesting to me because I'm not sure he thinks Chris will engage him in a util debate. I think
Really?
that this app has been broken new. So this
Right.
is a new plan. So they may be banking on Chris not having evidence on the Afghanistan debate and Chris being forced to go for the framework debate. So that's interesting, right? Like now this is the second example we've seen of a plan being broken in outrounds of a tournament. And presumably the idea is to catch the negative by surprise and to not have preparation.
Sure, yeah.
So it's interesting. Theoretically, I think this AF made a huge decision, right? And I'm not sure if it's the best decision or the worst decision. And it didn't work out for Rom in this debate, but this debate was very close, so not necessarily the reason he lost. But I think that had Rom set up, some paradigm issues, that could have also been helpful. Like, perhaps he could have set up competing interps, or perhaps he could have set up, only AF gets reject the debater. Although I'm sure Chris is ready for those types of shenanigans. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it really depends on the round and the opponent. But I think that it's noteworthy this AF doesn't have anything theoretical.
Right.
And this is something that we'll revisit at the end of this debate to see whether or not we thought that was a good idea or a bad idea. So in terms of the substance of this AF, fairly straightforward. Just a util framework with actor specificity and epistemology as the justifications. Fairly stock cards with Waller and Papineau. Then it's just the plan. And it's a very, very nuanced and long plan. So it's interesting. It seems like Brom read this AF expecting Chris to engage.
Sure.
Because this AF is almost 5 minutes of substance.
I think it's really interesting that he only reads 2 cards on the framework debate, but he goes like really in depth and explaining the implications of those cards in the 1AC. A lot of debaters don't do that and just do it in the 1AR. So like maybe he is like expecting a theory engagement, framework engagement. But so he has like all the implications of his evidence like laid out already.
Yeah, I also think that it's interesting to see how he chose quality over quantity of util justifications. That instead of reading like 6, 7 justifications, he only read 2, but like very in-depth explanations for both of them.
Sure.
Cool. So now if we're Chris and we're doing cross-examination, what should we focus on?
What is the plan?
Right, so focusing on understanding the details of the plan.
Yeah.
That's basically all there is, right? Because this AF otherwise is straightforward.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's see what Chris does.
The Morgan 09 evidence, everything underlined was red. Okay, there's only a sentence my one. Sure, but everything else is highlighted. Yep. Cool. Ready? Yes. All right. Let's talk about the plan text. So it says you limit the extraction of mineral. Why is this significant? Why is this just one mineral as opposed to minerals? It's like a spelling error. Spelling error. Okay. So you say the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, Pakistan was significant mineral extraction. How much does and Pakistan? Sure. So it says community monitoring of mining. So how does that occur? What's this? It says community monitoring of mining. Oh yeah. So local tribes and your local elder councils would have a say. Sure. Why is that inherent to a conflict or trade-off between resource extraction and profit extraction? Why don't we counterplan community monitor mining? It's a component of normal ways of implementing a ban on mining. Why is it a component of banning mining? Why can't we just implement community monitoring of mining? Well, the way it's done in Afghanistan is to work with locals. Wait, that's the only way the government. Your inherency shows that. No, Chris, you're getting confused. The way the government traditionally implements policies is to work with local elders. That's how they're effective because there are a lot of tribal disputes. Okay, sure. So do then the local elders decide the environmental policies? No, they don't. They just have oversight. They get to access like environmental protection reports. Okay, sure. So are the companies currently, how much are they being limited to that infrastructure? In the status quo, there's not a limit on it. Right. So how much does the plan change that? It's a total ban. It's a total ban. Yep. So it's significantly limited. It's a total ban. Yep. Okay. That's fine. So you say most of the people that own it right now is specific to harm foods benefit for mining. Is it a ban on all minerals or just for harm foods? All minerals. All minerals or all foods? Yeah. That's fine. Okay. And it's through local populations. That is one component of the message. Okay, that is fine. Let's talk about the what comes first, active specificity or epistemology? I don't do any weighing. You don't do any weighing. Are you going to read like weight distinction first? Or are you using the one area depending on my strategy? If extinction links to your NC, then I reserve the right to make my impacts relevant to your NC. Yes. That's fine. Let's talk about the solvency. So is the solvency based off winning and losing local populations, or is it based off of the effects of limited resource construction? Well, my argument is that protecting community water and land, which is an effort of environmental protection, would win over local populations. So there are two independent links. You okay. One. Sure. But the instability link or the first advantage is that it alienates local populations and drives them to the Taliban. Well, there's that. There's also cross-border terrorism. Cross-border terrorism as a result of legal resource extraction. Right. So non-state groups. Okay, those are the two internal links. Second internal link is enhanced stability. The stability again is this the legal resource extraction that's going on. I'm confused as to what the app is. What do you mean? Wait, is the internal link why you're able to solve illegal resource extraction or the second advantage? Yeah, a component of the plan is a prohibition on armed groups benefiting from mining. That's fine.
Okay, so let's go over this cross-examination. So Chris first starts with a question about the plan text, right?
The mineral versus minerals.
Right, and that's really smart of Chris to catch because Chris wants to make sure that there's not some trick in this AF that he did not catch, right?
Yeah.
Turns out the AF has a spelling error in it.
Yeah.
Which is noteworthy because, usually in late out rounds of a tournament like the TOC, we want to try to avoid in the plan text spelling errors because the plan text becomes your advocacy.
Right.
right? So it just unnecessarily opens yourself up to potential T and potential theory. And it also opens yourself up potentially to really cheap shot implementation concerns, like
You're only limiting one mineral.
right, or just like plan will never pass because it has like spelling errors in it, right? Or
Yeah,
like just
sure.
like grammar concerns and things like that. So big learning lesson here is that you want to triple and quadruple check your plan text.
Sure.
When you're reading a plan, your plan text becomes your advocacy statement. You're redefining the resolution. It's like if you debated a resolution with a spelling error in it, right? That would be ridiculous. We would never heard of that. That's never happened. And that's why we have such a long selection process on resolutions and why there's so much thought that goes into which resolution will be debated.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first thing. Then the next thing in this cross-examination is that it focuses on how the plan will be implemented. That's the next segment of this cross-ex.
Sure.
And it's a lot of clarification-based questions, and I think Chris gets what he wants out of this. Neither debater is perceptually dominant compared to the other.
Right.
And this is a great example of how clarification can be done without making yourself lose dominance. So the thing Chris does in this clarification, as opposed to other clarification CXs we've seen, is that Chris is much more attentive to the answers that Rom is giving.
Right, exactly. I think he like one time repeated like what Rom said, so this is true, and then Rom was like, yeah.
So basically, Chris is minimizing the amount of time Rom talks in between questions, and Chris is directing the flow of the clarification.
Yeah.
So instead of being like, tell me what disadvantage says, instead of asking a super broad question, he asks specific questions that that help solve small pieces of the puzzle. So instead of asking Rom to clarify the whole puzzle by himself, Chris has Rom walk him through the puzzle one step at a time.
Sure.
And in this case, puzzle is just a metaphor for the case and the scenario.
Sure.
Okay, so then I found it interesting that after this, Chris moved up to the framework to ask about first whether there was weighing between actor specificity and epistemology, to which Rom said no, and second, to ask about whether or not the 1AR could go for extinction triggers against NC frameworks. And I think the way Rom handled this was really good. Rom said, I reserve the right to make my impacts relevant to your NC.
Yeah, I wrote exactly that phrase down.
Yeah, and so I think that he's sounding very reasonable there, and it makes a lot of sense, right?
I think this directly contrasts with this year's TOC that we watched between the cross-section between Pranav and David, where like David was like, okay, I'll grant you this. It's like, okay, I'll grant you that. Instead, Ram is standing his ground and saying like, basically like, 1AR has the right to do anything like I can't do.
Yeah, I think it would have been very unlikely that Pranav got Ram to concede that the NC strategy would have been fair.
Sure.
Right? And I think that the way you go about that is you say, I reserve the right to maintain my 1AR flexibility. I will not tell you whether or not I think your strategy is fair until after the one end. It depends on which arguments you make, how you make them, how you invest time. All these considerations go into whether or not I think your strategy is fair.
Sure.
That is a commitment I am unwilling to give you right now. And I encourage you to read theory against me if you think that I should commit in cross-examination. I would gladly engage you in the substance of that debate. Right?
Sure.
So something like that. So then the last thing is Chris goes to solvency. So the majority of this cross-examination has been focused on the substance of the AF.
Right.
So perhaps that's a hint that Chris will substantively engage this AC.
Also, like, I think it's interesting, like, even though Ram it sounds really quiet compared to Chris, he still maintains his perceptual dominance. Like, I wrote down the phrase, like, no, Chris, you're getting confused. Like, it shows that,
that you don't have to shout in order to be dominant.
Sure, exactly.
What is important is the rhetoric you're using and being very, very clear and very just forceful in terms of what you're saying.
I think Ram was trying to be like super helpful in the CX. Like, here, let me explain the AC to you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's watch the one end then. Okay, order is 3 off AC.
I'll try again. I'm sorry about that.
I can connect to the internet.
I'll let you know if you right now.
So we're currently listening to a flashing problem. My favorite.
You dock speaker points for that.
I do not dock speaker points. I just examine why I'm still doing this activity and contemplate the best way to die slowly.
3 offensive. 3 offensive. Alright, so there you go.
Again, pause after number and say author name.
Okay. Reflective equilibrium leads to revulsion balance between individuals' rights and social goods, risky no form. Where judgment and principle diversity reflect and adjusting private principle defense and generality, particularity, but no principle to use from revision to particular cases, which first guide by guidance order, then the own ability to pursue and guide own conception of a given passage, so one own conception of the good is more based on the mutual, the alternative delivered terms, each of these arguments must be regarded as derivative, shortly interrelated to the government arguments speaking on the case. This is a better way because governments don't just absolutely maximize rights, they rather make sure to minimize rights violations. All more rights and all more theories of privacy, individual agency, and conception of freedom, copy, absolute use, responsibility for own freedom, freedom of others, too. For each having a special responsibility for having their life goes to pretend we need to understand the responsibility for privacy. For each of us to be answerable to make our own lives, must take responsibility for ways our actions change, like prospects of responsible impacts we have on another, discovering individual transactions see fit, that individual left free to advance their own ends, told about capture the unique responsibility the other person will maintain freedom to one's own conception of the good, or see through. If I am true to damage to present family from the powerful to present the good, this includes responsibility for own life division, a responsibility to considerable life destruction for law firm, to be injured, I'm liable to damages which in fact in place with respect to your ability to know conception of good. The criteria is maintaining toward laws, system of justice, detention. And the government can only do so much, but going beyond these protecting individual ability to their own good government can only infringe on so far as protects overall body freedom of return. Justice not suffice our toward law or exerts as a side function lasting at all 11. Toward law theories have been successfully applied to remedy numerous harms and environmental and never been for remedy for harm and absence of direct injury and they're elected to recognizing harm suffered where the injury is least marginal. B, not part of the good. Environmental protection might not be part of the person A, such as even person B wants to make not be coercive compliance with support. My shared primary business means I don't have this overall, but others can subordinate them to their pursuit because someone wrong, they interview my ability to take responsibility for my life, and private means I have to use it. Such a person advances their conception of good before the first share versus violates my freedom by subordinate, taking my part to decide which purpose is advanced. And this specifically links to the app because he's directly limiting all mineral resource extraction means that people who own the rights to the property or using it limited from their own conception of good. And theory interpretation about acceptable and next standards or ethics practice must be read in the AC. This is preemptive. You read one theory like he usually does, and that benefit is strategy. In other words, you get bi-directional theory. You can go for either a count no count screws and negative every time. So you always have a violation. Extra speech to be defended. Also more substance based. You can say what you want to make to be avoided. Unnecessary. You predict both. Correct top, not random issues. Next up is gazing interpretation. The avenue text defended by the firm must constitute an enactable policy is the violation. Firstly, he says the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, that's not a state, it's the Islamic State of Afghanistan. Second, he says there's a Islamic Republic of Pakistan. He says Pakistan must be actually as long as the Republic of Pakistan means not inactive, he's not talking about actually government. Third, he doesn't say resolve. In the plan text means that there's no reason why he's able to solve for the case because that's not actually put into action. For the inline is different from inline. He has it spaced out differently, means that it's not able to solve in this particular context. Inline is like a shoe, something in a shoe, but that is not like inconsistent with. Means that plants fall. Sixth, fifth is a misplaced modifier because it says the minerals are online, not the limiting of extraction. He's not able to solve. 60 says mineral, but there are 1,000 types of minerals. He can see that there's spelling error means that it's not enactable if there are errors in the text. 8 and 7 he reserves the right to clarify means that means that the plan is not able to be implemented because it means that clarification needed total shift that you need should be found on open to revision. He is the voter jurisdiction. Like something a plan to change valid question for question resolution question desirability plan. You have jurisdiction to endorse course action possible to take about required to endorse this plan from you can endorse in non-sensible plan introduce double on either A you drop the plan as unenactable or you vote negative to endorse the plan text free draw the philosophy from its word this external reason vote even like with desirability my interpretation engage in valid on carbon level as long as I perceive this violation you have to not endorse affirmation of flawed plan jurisdiction issues from part and the evaluation ground includes you from signs out for a specific debater. Then the next up counter plan text is resolved as long as state of Afghanistan and Islamic Republic of Pakistan will prioritize the environment modified toward law to compensate for damage due to risk of environmental harm. Funding is the normal means the competition competes on net benefits mutual assistance the big rate of cost of defend a company for paying damage in enforcement. Second, competes on net benefits. Third, redundancy of policy maker capacity lawsuits the same ones. 4, philosophical competition of policy maker with the free market toward approach and product prevention strategy are legitimate. He said that the communities are managing it. My argument is that you set up a core system where people can sue for damage environmental damage and the system is prioritized solves the API self-collective action plan pollution makes one a lot more effective. Ross 73. Governments have no economic incentive private for example, than anyone. Now the governments live with compensate for their aggression against property fraud by the course of doing has a damage to these and just for further aggression. General Motors owning the Mississippi River water will be kept in enough access during the case of air pollution and protected private property in what lungs, fields, and orchards. Also, free market sells better, more efficient spurs innovation suit for efficiency-oriented regulation reduces cost of ensuring environmental health and can redirect entrepreneurial energy toward finding reducing pollution effectively rather than ways to comply with rules, costs, or minimizing more resources available for more productive tasks which can be devoted more environmental protection. Go to the AC. As an overview, you go first, you can't wait between pleasures as possible, wait for learning, learning details, you can't wait second, every impact to be set impacts into a video, right now with all the important impacts that happens, you can't feel free, you may not need not start, I mean, you'll just bad sport record usually, feeling is relative, so you can't wait pain objective before, you don't tell us the subjective states of fear, doesn't acceptable date, all you have is subjective position, we don't have God's ID 5, every usual calculation was all factors, risk is wrong, but each has its own risk to be infinite, and usual create infinite uncertainty takes forever, you calculate this, you can't use this, we can't aggregate, you can't explain equal migrant, go, have the totals, to weigh against people, then, line by line, on the Loyola, this isn't true. For example, the German government structure between rights and different rights. So even if there are trade arguments, then violation is always worse than proactive. Second, this is impossible for government capability because there are different consequences always shift from day to day. The decision by the infinite redistribution is possible for the government to function on a higher level. Clearly, you're not able to solve any harms. Even if there are trade-offs, my argument is that the only reason trade-offs are justified is because they protect individual rights. But if you call it indirect violation, then I walk in terms of the other path. Now, argument this controls no. The first is no nature linked to aggregation. There's no nature linked to aggregation because I can experience another person's pain. Second, term because we experience freedom or our ability to make our own choices every day because we know that it's more verifiable because that is something that we have to act. Clearly, this is insufficient features because we can access through natural rules. You also know the epistemic action of the entity as well means that it does not apply standard. Then on the case, he needs to win solvency for why he's able to solve better, but he and his systems comparatively worse. Government regulation creates monopolies which increase environmental harms. Company has no accountability. Politics and management it makes resources vulnerable to special interest groups. Government power to use their advantage groups and the ability to concentrate benefits. Government action costs are dispersed through the whole society. Regulations to serve to reduce competition, cartelizing industry attention, increase returns. Got the card there. Also, even if he says that it's true, the action that is comparatively worse. That's comparatively worse because that is comparatively worse because the communities be shifted or be bought out. Means he's not able to solve means that I control the interlinkage and instability, or it's also only proper resolve environmental harms, increase regulation, incentivize structural usage, Adler 2, mechanism relax conceptual like mechanisms, hampering mechanisms, environmental programs, more environmental programs, or severe lack of force proper risk, resources politically controlled or more actively managed benefits, increase use of control of household dispersed.
Okay, so technically, Chris is very good. He's easy to follow. He doesn't stumble. Chris is, I think, the first exposure we've had to a debater who, in one speech, illustrates the ability to execute several skill sets very well.
Sure.
Which is the framework debate, the util debate, and the theory debate.
Sure.
Right? So this is a great example of how being multi-versatile can be really useful because you're not pigeonholed into just going for framework against this app. You can also go for case.
Sure.
Now, substantively, the big picture note here is that this one-end strategy is brilliant. And the reason why is because it gives itself 3 legitimate outs come the 2NR. It can go for the turns on AF case via the CP and the Adler cards. It can go for the T shell, and it can go for the NC. So it has given itself numerous outs. Now, the 1AR, no matter what it does, is going to have to deal with the T shell.
Sure.
Now, once the 1AR deals with the T shell, either by just responding to it and then going for substance, or introducing a new theory shell, weighing it against this T shell, beating the T shell, and then going for substance, once the 1AR gets the substance, it needs to make a commitment. Is it going to go for turns on the NC, or is it going to try to win the framework debate and then win case?
Sure.
Now, this is a dilemma that the 1AR is going to have to fight through, and that the negative strategy was brilliant on. Because Chris is presumably very well prepped for the 2NR on the NC.
Right.
And he probably understands how offense links into his framework better than Rom does. So the 1AR knows this and probably has an incentive to not go for straight turns on the NC and go for framework. However, when he goes for framework, Chris is also smart in that he makes the framework debate a shit show. He makes these 6 quick, somewhat blippy, probably mostly blippy, arguments in an overview, and then responds specifically to the Waller analysis and also to Papineau. So the 1AR will definitely have to invest some time on the framework debate.
Right.
Additionally, there's justifications for the framework on the NC. So this is not going to be a quick framework debate. But the problem for the 1AR is that once it gets through the framework, it still has to win case.
Right.
So in a lot of debates where the negative doesn't turn the AC, the 1AR, once it gets through framework, wins the round.
Right. Yeah.
In this round, when you turn the AC as well, the 1AR, once it gets through framework, does not win the round.
Right.
So this round is a fantastic example of the strategic value of turning the AC. Now, this is a strategy that has been around for a while. The strategy is NC theory AC, and on AC you make 5 to 10 arguments on the framework, and you make 2 to 3 carded turns to the case.
Sure.
And the reason this strategy is really awesome is because if the 1AR doesn't go for an RVI, it probably won't get offense on the theory debate absent introducing a new shell. And so usually in this strategy, either theory becomes a no-risk issue for the negative, or it becomes an all-in issue that the 1AR has to commit to in sacrificing substance.
Right.
And by sacrificing substance, it means that the only job that the 2NR has to do is to collapse the debate back down to substance.
Right.
So in a world where the 1AR goes for introduce new shell, respond to his shell, substance, it probably is going to leave itself thin on one of those layers, either responding to the shell, the neg red, or on substance.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so NC strategy is brilliant. The one other thing that should be caught is that there's this preempt at the bottom of the NC against 1AR theory.
Right. Yeah. The underview.
Yeah.
Wait.
And
What was the interp of the underview?
the interp of the underview was that 1AR theory shells must be written in the 1AC, at least the interps.
Oh, sure.
And he specifically says, like, this is to stop Rom from going for theory in the 1AR like he usually does. Right? And so Chris is telling everyone in the room, look, Rom is the theory debater. We all know he's going to try to uplayer in the 1AR. Don't let him. Right? And it gives a couple of fairly good reasons the 1AC should include some theoretical justification. The example that Rom gives, or that Chris gives, is you can either go for must read a CP or can't read a CP in every single round. And this forces you to commit.
Right.
So the negative knows what you think a fair debate is and can adapt accordingly. Okay, so if you're the AF in cross-examination, what are you going to try to accomplish?
Well, I think that before cross-examination, I would want to decide whether I go for a framework, whether I go for turns onto the turns under the NC, or I would want to beat framework and also win substance. If it's the former, I would want to clarify how offense under the NC works. If it's the latter, I would want to clarify first what the CP is. I think it's a quartz counter plan.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I think that also illustrates the value of having generic CPs when like someone breaks like a new app. I would want to like first clarify the counterplan. Second, clarify how his framework offense functions or how his framework functions. And uh, yeah, I think the AC arguments under the framework are pretty explanatory. I would also want to understand the terms under AC. And then, but regardless of either of those strategies, you have to understand theory. So I'm gonna have to ask something about theory.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty good summary to me. So let us listen to Rom's cross-examination and then have a conversation about that as well as what you think the ideal 1AR here would be.
Sure.
Okay.
The shell is below what you read, right?
Yes. There are also like a couple changes I need to make. The first is like the interpretation. It says reflect.
Can you do that here?
Yes, of course.
Okay, ready? Yes.
Constitute. Yeah. Yes.
So you say one of the implications is that they reject the plans to be a point of the jurisdiction.
Correct.
What does that mean?
It means that you would lose because when you defend a plan, you no longer defend the resolution but the interpretation.
So it is functionally the same thing as drop the debater.
Correct.
Okay. So then let's go to violations. Your only voter is jurisdiction.
Correct.
Why is that a voter?
Why is it a voter?
Yeah.
Because when you because you're not performing the resolution, there's no way to vote for you.
Why wouldn't it just mean that I would adopt a whole resolution act that is grammatically correct?
No, because when you defend the plan text, you shift away from the resolution to the specific
Right,
plan.
but you said for theory reasons that we should get rid of the plan. Wouldn't that grant me the right to sever?
No, because you would be able to shift your interpretation. You have to defend the plan
Right,
text.
Chris, but your interpretation says I should shift that. It is better in terms of jurisdiction.
No,
said
my
reject the
argument is you
argument.
don't have the jurisdiction to vote on the plan.
I don't have jurisdiction to vote on the plan?
Rob, you wrote your plan text. You should be responsible for the way you worded it, even if there's spelling errors. That's just sloppy on your part.
Okay, whatever. So then let's go to the counterpoint. What's the status?
Dispositional.
Under what conditions will you defend it?
The way I usually defend it, if you have straight turns to it, then I will still defend it.
Only straight turns?
If I can extend a firm as a test of competition to take out turns.
You reserve the right to extend a permutation, which is not unique to turn to counterpoint.
Well, it depends on how the firm interacts.
Okay, sure. So then let's go to the NC framework. Where do you justify reflective equilibrium? You say it implies.
What do you mean, where do I justify? That is the justification. My argument.
Right, no. Your Ripstein theorem is the first one stack. Reflective equilibrium leads to a Rawlsian balance. Where do you justify reflective equilibrium?
Yeah, my argument is that in the Ripstein argument itself, justify the reflective equilibrium. There's no principles that need to have been from a specific case.
Okay.
So we should look to principles that allow us to revise
Yeah,
our
okay. So your Ripstein two parts is that all moral theories are premised on individual agency. What is the conception of agency founded in this part? What does it mean to be an agent for your Ripstein two evidence?
It means to have my ability to pursue my own ends in a way that's consistent with everyone else's ability to do so.
How is this distinct from a normal Ripstein framework, like a system of boundary freedom?
Because it's not cut from force and freedom, because it says it's from like the division of responsibility and law court. It's erosion.
Sure. How do you narrow it down to tort law?
My argument is that tort law best respects a system of equal freedom because it makes sure that if someone inhibits my ability to pursue my own purposes, that they would likely there's a legal system.
Why would that be? Mean that the criterion is established for like, wouldn't that just be weighing underneath the standard?
It would be. You can make arguments for why you think better with the system of equal freedom. My argument is that this is the best way to respect.
So, what is the unique reason as to why like that would be the end of the framework? Why the criterion is more law? Is there any unique reason aside from like you say I can make an argument for my argument?
Simplicity.
Okay.
Okay, so this cross-ex starts with a lot of implication-based arguments on T, right? The first question, concession actually, that Rom gets out of Chris is that his drop the argument is functionally drop the debater, right? And so that's potentially relevant. We see a lot of debaters now offer drop the argument as a solution, and essentially drop the argument is the same thing as drop the debater.
Sure.
So that's important. Second thing that Rom tries to press Chris on is why he can't just adopt Chris's interp and debate underneath it.
Right.
Like he specifically says, it seems like jurisdiction would be the reason I should sever. That you give me reasons I should sever. Now this conversation is really dangerous for Chris. Chris needs to be very dominant here and needs to be very assertive, right? And Chris ends up doing that. For a second, it seems like Ron might be able to really push Chris on this issue.
Yeah, but Chris was like, put his foot down. It's like, dude, like you wrote the plan text, you should be held responsible for it.
Right, exactly. Like it's just sloppy on your part, is the way that Chris put it, right?
Sure, yeah.
And the response that elicited from Rom was, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but what Rom was doing there was really intelligent. He was trying to see if he could verbally bully Chris into just conceding that, he can debate underneath Chris's inter.
Sure, yeah.
So I think the other thing that Chris should have explained a little bit clearer is that when you read a plan text, you commit to changing the resolution.
Okay.
And Chris does mention this, but he could have done it a little bit more clearly. Ultimately, though, I think Chris handles this conversation just fine.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. The next conversation that happens is over the status of the CP. Now, I think this is foreshadowing that perhaps Rom can get a violation out of here, right? I'm not sure why Chris did not just defend it as unconditional. Because I think that had Chris done it that way, then he avoids a theory violation that Rom has.
Oh, also the counterplan is compatible with the NC, so like he can still go for the NC and the counterplan. But presumably is that he wants to get out of some offense if he puts like too much answers on the counterplan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for Chris, the reason I think it being unconditional is not a bad thing in this round is because he still has framework.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter if he loses the util debate ultimately.
Sure.
So Chris basically has to weigh out the difference between making it easier for Rom to win the util debate by turning the CP and putting a bunch of defense on it and not being able to concede that defense, or making it easier for Rom to get a theory violation.
Sure.
Make sense?
Uh-huh.
Okay. The last conversation that happens is on the NC. And Rom goes top down.
Sure.
The end of that conversation is about why the NC framework is impact justified. I.e., the NC, it's like if you read a util app and you say the standard is minimizing terrorism. Right? It doesn't make any sense why the standard is minimizing terrorism. Standard should be net benefits with weighing that terrorism is the most important. So similarly, in this case, the standard would be preserving a system of equal out of freedom, and the most important consideration underneath that is tort law. And so Rom also is foreshadowing a potential theory violation that says impact justified NCs are bad, or impact narrowed NCs are bad, right? And so he asks Chris why, and Chris gives a brilliant response, which is a one-word argument of simplicity, right? Like he says, "Why do you do it this way?" And Chris says, "Simplicity. It makes it clear." Right? And so Chris tells Rom explicitly, like, you're welcome to weigh underneath equal out of freedom. This is just my weighing for tort law. Okay, so now let's put ourselves into the perspective of being this 1AR. What would you do in this 1AR?
I would uplayer via theory and do reasons, do theory versus T. Well, I don't think this is really a T interpretation, right? It's so, I don't.
It's basically plan flaw.
Sure, yeah, it is plan flaw.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not topicality, though. Topicality defines like a word.
That the F is not topical, yeah. So it's not really T. You're right. I should read. It's essentially just plan flaw.
Sure.
And plan flaw impacting the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So if he reads theory, he definitely needs to do some fairness versus jurisdiction work.
Yeah, he needs to do the jurisdiction. Yeah, the way.
Ideally, he also puts responses to jurisdiction, saying like jurisdiction irrelevant.
Yeah, empirically denied also.
Right.
Yeah. Also, then after, so if I get theory offense, then I would I think I would just bite the bullet and try to win my framework and win my AC offense. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I'm envisioning something a tiny bit different. I think that the AC made one mistake by not including presume af. That had the AC had presume af, this is a potential strategy.
Okay.
One is go for reject the argument, which means let the af shift from plan text to whole res in the 1AR and defend the whole res as per. This is a specific advantage. Like the plan text just becomes one contention underneath whole res.
But he's clarifying that reject the argument means in this instance.
Right, and so I would say, look, like his version of reject the argument makes no sense. Like the real version of reject the argument should be letting the af shift from plan text to whole res.
Sure.
So that would be the first thing I do. Second thing I would do is I would make a ton of responses to plan flaw. Question why we care about jurisdiction. Question about what's more important, fairness or jurisdiction. It's sort of hard to beat the violation. Like this.
Yeah,
plan,
there's like 8 violations.
Yeah, and the plan is sort of flawed.
Yeah.
Right, so
like
I
even
would focus.
Admittance, yes, yeah.
Right, like I would focus more on the so what, and then the next thing I would do is I would read a theory shell, both against the CP and against the NC.
2 theory shells.
Probably, and because now if theories reject the argument, that is a great way to get rid of the NC and the CP.
Oh yeah, probably if you reject the argument, you need to do that, right?
Right. And ideally now you're at about 2 minutes to 2 minutes 30 seconds in your 1AR. And for the last 90 seconds, I would go for turns to the NC.
Okay.
And I would say, look, like if
obviously it's more strategic to go that way, but I'm not sure that I would be able to
win it. Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think that what you have going for you is that the 2AR can also always collapse the theory. Knowing that the presume af means that if you win the theory against the NC goes away.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Like, when you concede framework, you also get rid of the CP.
Okay. Sure.
Do you see what I'm saying? So getting rid of framework means you get rid of both the Adler turns and the framework debate and the CP debate. All that's left is the NC.
Okay.
And then you have theory against the NC. Sure. Now, the other way this 1AR could go...
Why would get rid of the AC turns and Adler turns?
Presumably they only impact back to util, not the NC.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now, the other way you could give this 1AR is not read reject the argument, and instead concede reject the debater, and go for 2 theory shells way, and then do everything I just said to also give yourself a substantive out. So go for theory plus substance.
Sure.
My guess is that that's what Rom's going to try to do.
Okay. Sure.
Make sense? All right, so let's see what happens.
Okay, is everyone ready? Alright. A interpretation if the neg reason to alter back to be negative and that advocacy unconditionally be violations of distance from process standards draft cohesive with condition with tilt time count pigeonhole one side that's strict 2 and up count match up with a card of defense while from allow count on defense 1 winner or the first to some off judge. I can't defend my actions only have defense distance action is unreciprocal force speed defense count is not responsive. I can't act just start connect the call different permutations defense only for opportunities often looking kick the Arkansas explodes in the ground he can act my captain any count with the that benefits they can't judge one topic which is not particularly after education also destroys slash is never responsible for any cover on the captain of use is not tripping he has a 6 minute 2 hours to crush my hands so I need to go to attack the captain any direction one side to keep parents that give around a reasonable understanding of particularly keep parents that can't engage victim ground keep parents to take blacks to the valid voter fairness basic connect with all the second education schools fund based education drop theaters one rather than replicate from out of his time and all from judge checking second judge are two chairs these just local judge keep the time performance who's all one first that game or boss tied from here my only check these can be easy to be our choosing rather than race to the bottom next off interpretation if the act prevents the whole resolution or an impact inclusive standard if the negative reads a paramedic says after the negative may not read a narrow standard and or must concede the affirmative framework to clarify either a narrow standard or a countless greater mind just not the combination clarify for the negative not read a standard of consistency with Torla or whatever the standard was an act of accountable in violation he does exactly that standard one ground he compared to cut the direction of by acting act two charge more the repetition act on his grant for narrow standard alone is being constrained by a predictable and defined set of scores there's no limit combination for actually so he's on floating negative ground he can find a standard rejecting colonialism and dividends capital which includes topics that this has independently to the slash he's not responsible dealer to protect the policy and it's like the most named capitals like this. Proper example, destroy top patient guidance scheme fairness, possible 1 second, is draft to active from using capitals to always be net beneficial under his frame net. Better distance, disadvantage, combination of the plan of the capitals can literally be anything given that a breadth of the frame can never truly just count combination, even if the AC and CPR means there's no tangible trade-off between the permutation and the CP, it'll always be net beneficial under narrow narrative. The CP are uniquely because the generic impact the turn or knowing the net benefit relevant on the term guide for better the best reference against the capital. Infinitely, I can't concede with frame for make defense, but I which choose my strategy, possibly one strategy in fairness. Now, on a view. First of all, this is not information. There's no violation. There's no shell done. Bottom symptoms of motivation. Next second term, that term stretch. I do not know what it's going to be. The one I can't predict that. Which are often equal. Is also the 8 point. It allows for negative. This is always worse than after. You still have 6 and short accomplished. The side by 8 point allows for input. You can just my interpretation. Negative. You have a million of these things. One thing I'm forced to do it in the AC also. Now the line one answer one correct interpret stop. That's one I have chosen for you to defend second. It's your fault. Your BC uses around there. Say marshal fact substitution. The everything the sorry the line below the AC and the winner indicates that there's a permanent speed for it. You have 6 and short means you have 2 speech developed here, which is that works. Now on the show. Okay. First of all, I made an enacted policy. That just because the bad policy is not I cannot be enacted. Me, since I have some kind of guard condition. Second, it's a counter interpretation. I can choose not spend on enacted policy if I want to clarify the process. Reaching 1 100% of his office. There's never my teaching that, which means I would have done policy that I want, but you can still vote in terms of jurisdiction. Never one is to turn this out wastes you. You do not consider only if I said no, that means you could actually have a violation, which I wastes that. Allows for your piece also in B point is the net goal of theory. Which we talk about from topic page now. The line you say jurisdiction, that means drop it. That means your counter goes away. This is just an unwarranted judge not voting section. That means I the whole resolution be consistent in your position. You grant your second third. This means that you uniquely have an argument question of dropping the debater. I want to remember this. He has a 6 and 2 rest that the place to drop the debater then for me. Now on the AC. Sorry, NC. Right. Concede the framework. This implies system of the conceding relates merely agent that rationally climax can be out of him or others to doctor will act right people from the 30% their freedom and even 50% of the essential limitation both their own and others freedom their essential preserving the ending capital is sacred. Now is the offense turn it extracting risks of violation the extracting article violation system acting extracting Mexicans harm the natural defense of future probably the current ones randomizing to generate industrial obligation future generations cutting force for future facility made attention to explode or attempt the action on a paper and this also weighs negative offense violation force and future most notable agents can occur innovation or lack of chance their situation now on the libel. I want to link no attack action. This is not inclusion second. It's not an a priori judgment. This is on the term about together. This is not even personal judgment. This is just for example different courts can have court law for this is assumed to just be included within the state and both with this out of freedom. Not like risking greed back against the standard. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, so I actually predicted perfectly what Ron was going to do. Ron decided not to really go for reject the argument. He decided to uplayer with both the shells that were foreshadowed in cross-examination to respond to the jurisdiction argument, to respond to the underview, and then go for a turn on the NC.
Sure.
And I think that strategy was much more smart than going for AC offense because he had to fight through a lot more to get there.
Yeah.
So the larger picture is that this illustrates the value of having offense that you can read against all neg frameworks.
Right, yeah.
If ROM didn't have, or A, have an understanding of how equal outer freedom worked, and B, didn't have evidence indicating that voting neg violates equal outer freedom, this would have been much harder to collapse the NC.
Sure, yeah.
And now, normally the way that poor collapses to the NC on day out frameworks happen is you try to leverage the util impacts from the AC, and you say that life precludes, like people can't have equal outer freedom if they're dead, and things like that. This is much smarter. He's talking about the action of the negative violating equal outer freedom. And so he doesn't he doesn't force himself to win the additional layer of the AF offense. He is allowed to kick all of it and go for turns.
Right, yeah.
Also notice how he concedes the NC. He concedes the NC by just saying, I concede framework, turn it. So instead of explicitly extending arguments and being super formal about it, his concession is very, very technical.
Yeah, and very
fast.
Short and concise.
Right, short and concise, exactly. Now, the other big picture tech note here needs to be that, again, there's one judge who has consistently been telling Rom to slow down.
Right.
And so I think you can already take a wild guess that that judge probably is going to vote negative.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So Rom has already split the panel. This is important. This means that he has to be perfect for both the other two judges.
Yeah.
Right? If it's a 5-person panel and you're splitting one person off of it, that's fine. You still have 4 judges.
Yeah.
Right? You can afford to lose one of the other 4. But if it's a 3-person panel and you're splitting one of them, that's a lot more troubling because you have to win both the other two judges' ballots.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So in terms of the substance of this 1AR, I think the substance of this 1AR, I'm not too sure the second theory shell is very persuasive. It's obviously written well. I think the one thing he does on the theory debate, which is both smart and a little frustrating as a judge, is he doesn't number his standards. It's just like
that's
one
true.
long paragraph.
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, it's really hard to tell when his standards separate, especially when there's extra weighing linking to other standards. Like he said, clash key to topic education. I'm like, is that like a new
Yeah.
standard? Yeah.
So I think a really smart meta theory shell here to read in response is that if you've gone to at least 2 circuit tournaments, or if you have I mean, I guess in this instance I would be like, if you have illustrated that you can do a theory debate, which we can gauge by the fact that you're in out rounds of TOC or something like that. Basically, this plank would just be there not to exclude people who don't know theory.
Right.
But basically, if you know theory debate, you have to number your standards,
Sure.
or at least number and isolate your internal links.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's both for minimizing judge intervention and to maximize clarity and clash.
Yeah.
So I think we should add this to your homework list, writing out this meta shell.
Okay.
And this would be a reason to independently reject both of those theory shells.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is true meta theory.
Yeah, it's probably true that you should number your standards also your internal links.
Yeah. I think the only disadd is that you have to spend a few more seconds on the structure. But I think the net benefits far outweigh that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I noticed that Rom doesn't put a lot of arguments on the actual shell that Chris introduced. Like he simply tries. What is the counter interp? He says this solves 100% of your offense.
Yeah, I didn't catch the counter interp, and this is like bad for Rom because he really actually should be going slower here.
Sure.
Right? Like, I have no idea what his counter interpretation here is. I also didn't catch a lot of his argument. Like, I got, like, pieces of his arguments here and there on Chris's show, but I didn't understand the full, argument on every single one of them.
See, the only thing I wrote for counter interpretation, defend policy, solves F. I don't know what that means. And then he brings up that deterrence outweighs. I don't understand why. That's probably on the rejected argument versus rejected debate. Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Yeah. I think that in this round, it's clear that the theory debate is a lot clearer in Rom's head than it is as it's being articulated to everyone else.
Sure.
Right? Like, all these arguments probably made 100% sense to him, and they probably are good arguments, but it doesn't make as much sense to the people following along.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So this is a great example now. We keep talking about how strategy and tech is more important than speed. Mm-hmm. That if you're slower but you're still technically efficient and you're strategic, that can make up for the lack of arguments.
Yeah, like what I think Chris did. Also, like what's interesting to note is that is the terms under the NC that if Chris tries to exclude the turns, then it proves the offense, it proves the abuse on the shell. But if Chris allows the turns, it simply weighs the tort law offense and proves there's no abuse on the shell. So I think this smart strategy for Chris would be to, just to weigh his tort law offense versus this. Like I'm just doing weighting as part of my standard. You can still have access to offense that's like previously contextualized.
Yeah. I think the other really smart thing for this 1AR would have been, instead of over allocating on theory so much, would have been to cut out the second theory shell. Spend that time weighing fairness versus jurisdiction because there was no weighing in this round between those two shells. Yeah. And then also spent the other time on the NC.
Sure.
So in this round, the red herring is the NC, right? He could have made the NC instead of a red herring a legitimate out for the 2AR.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is a classic example of the 1AR going too hard for theory.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
The 1AR could have read one less shell and could have given itself all that time weighing between the first shell and the T shell or the plan flaw that Chris reads, and additionally just making his arguments on the plan flaw clearer, and then putting more defense on the NC offense. Make sense? So let's see how this under allocation harms him. I also think it's worth real quick to talk about the 1AC, right? The 1AC didn't include anything theoretically.
Yeah.
And so at the very least, now it becomes clear maybe the 1AC could have included an argument saying the 1AC doesn't need to tell its theory interps prior to the 1N, and that could have precluded the underview that Chris read.
Well, he probably didn't know Chris was gonna make that argument. I don't think that most people would include that because that's not like a common thing to.
That's true. He probably didn't predict that. So that's a good point. Maybe he could have predicted the jurisdiction claims, though, or done fairness comes first weighing. Although I guess he didn't want to commit to that
Yeah.
either because he might go for education in the
Sure.
1AR.
Mhm.
But bottom line is, he's not getting to leverage any of the 1AC.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, the AF has lost entire value of the 1AC.
That's a really good point to make. That it's basically that if he lost 6 minutes of his speech time, well, Chris still gets the entirety value. Well, not the
entire value.
Yeah,
Chris now doesn't get value to the Adler turns or
Right.
the framework responses
Yeah,
or
the
the counterplan.
but it still values Chris's speech, like say half of it at least.
Exactly. And so it's probably also clear here now, just like in the Bob Overing versus Noah round, that the 2AR is probably going to try to collapse to theory.
Sure.
Right? So now if you're the 2NR, your first job is probably to try and resolve substance ASAP.
Yeah.
Now, a huge difference for this 2NR versus the 2NR that Noah gave against Bob in finals in 2012 was that this 2NR also has a theory out.
Right.
Noah's 2NR was all defensive because he didn't read theory in the 1N.
Right. Oh yeah.
Chris's 2NR could go for 6 minutes of theory and have a theory out. Chris's 2NR could collapse out of substance.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He doesn't need to go for substance. Now, another option for Chris is make sure there's no like reasons that his plan flaw argument is somehow magically a reason to affirm. Beat both of Rom's shells and win substance. I don't think that's a very good option.
No, it's not.
It puts him in a situation where he has a
It's a
nib.
nib, yeah.
He has to win both of the shells that Rom reads, and then has to win substance.
Probably should just concede rejected debater and win the shell anyway.
Right, and so the 2AR does have this for itself, is that it has ammunition. This round is nowhere close to over.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. The 1AR left itself like a pretty open 2AR.
Yeah, exactly. A very open 2AR.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's listen to what this 2NR does, and we will analyze strategy accordingly.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And Randall.
It's important to note here, Chris gave himself 3 minutes of prep time for the 2NR.
Sure.
So again and again, we're seeing that if the 2NR does not have prep time, this speech will be much more disorganized and poor, both in terms of the substance of the line by line and in terms of the big picture strategy.
Right.
Having prep time is crucial, especially at your level.
Sure.
So we're just going to be starting with an overview, vote on time block. After that, we'll go to the underview to the NC, and then the shells in order outside votes from there. I want you to vote on time block. Is everybody ready to go? Rob, you cannot expect to win the TOC when you have a plan with spelling errors in it. I'll prove you why. You cannot vote for the plan in the first place. You do no weighing between jurisdiction or between meta theory and my shells means if I do the weighing for you, then you grant me credence on these specific issues. So you said that if I win plan, I win weighing between jurisdiction and fairness, and that is a sufficient vouch for me. No new weighing into ARP. Have these arguments. These are all in the NC means you can give no credence on these arguments. So you extend the interpretation. You must defend inactable affirmative amendment. Must reflect the constituted inactable policy extent. Conditions. He can see like 6 of them. First, that he doesn't actually defend real countries. Come on, you should have been able to research this. You cut all these cards with the app. Said that the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan is not a state. It's the Islamic State of Afghanistan. Second, that it's not the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. It's not just Pakistan. It's the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Thirdly, that he does not say the word resolve. This is damning in this specific case because he does not because the resolve is necessary to say that the issue is resolved and that you actually implement it into policy. Congress, even if he makes this absurd notion of fiat that he said fiat means, this takes it out. He said fourthly that inline is different from inline to 2 words. Means that it's not an actual policy he gets. None of the offense. Also, the argument that he reserves the right to clarify. He can see that he reserves the right to clarify means that the plan is not enactable because he can shit what the plan does at any time. Also, he answers back to CSS interpretation means he does not meet the interpretation. He also said net benefit is I can shift it in cross-examination. Firstly, you pick your interpretation. No excuses in this specific case. You do not get to change the grammar of your plan text and the interpretation. You have the ability to write this before. Secondly, you all appear to very standards. I win. The reason why jurisdiction comes first. You have to go for me on that later. You also say you means the counterplan goes away. You also say means the counterplan goes away. There's no impact factor to this. You don't because negating just means to disprove the app means that you have the burden in this specific case. Second, you don't propose any plan flaw arguments for why it's bad, and here means that there's no reason why this goes away. Third, that also there's reasonable expectation that you should defend the plan text unconditionally means that this uniquely is a reason to drop. You do not get to sever your advocacy in 1 year. Because my strategy is predicated on you having a consistent advocacy in the first place. You can send each jurisdiction voter because by writing a plan, change the about from the question of the resolution to question desirability of the plan. He picked the plan. He should have been more prepared to defend it for quarters of the freaking TOC. Instead, it's an external reason to vote. Even though I don't want desirability of the plan, it engages the ballot on a prior level because otherwise there's no reason to vote for me. This comes before his various argument because even if it's a structure dispute, you guys around his plan doesn't even freaking affirm in the first place means that it does not come first. Even this wing is conceded from the NC. You don't let him do it in 1 AR. You just let the various layers come first. He just says 6 minutes 2 NR. Means you can classify there's no reason why that comes first. The second layer of the theory is the meta theory arguments that I'll be going to extend. The meta theory argument that if extend the meta theory interpretation that extend the meta theory interpretation that if the app has an interpretation regarding the advocacy or the standard text that he has to read in the 1AC but not in the 1AR extended strategy or strategy regarding he can always read theory no matter what I do. For example, in this specific ground, have you ever seen Rom not go for 2AR theory in this specific case? This is unique abuse in this case because he's always going to go for 2AR theory. Means that it's comparatively hard to refute both these shells, especially choose that the 2AR can collapse to the issue. You mean you can collapse to either one of these shells. It's comparatively hard for me to win the RBI because it's comparatively hard for me to win the RBI because that would require new argument and it would be a 2NR 2AR debate, which would be comparatively hard to resolve. Also, I co-opt all the Also, the other problem doesn't have a counter interpretation. Instead of being interpretations for him means that he needs to have counter interpretation to this argument. It means that this means I would find myself outweighs this comes before his argument. First he wanted to. First he says it's not unpredictable for me to know your interpretation and I don't know your strategy. Firstly, you can read these arguments in the AC. You can broadly phrase your arguments like must defend the Congress and may not be the counter that means that solving this specific case. Secondly, I just say for standards and advocacy text. You I should have read those in the AC, especially because you were very predictable that I would be counter and a framework, especially against the app you chose. Thirdly, you say infinite abuse. It's not infinite abuse. You just have to tell me what to do earlier. Thought I would solve for all of the abuse because if it did that, then I would have a chance to meet your interpretation, where you can always go for 1 AR theory like you always do. Fourthly, you say there's a million different arguments in the AC. Means that wait, I should sorry. Okay. Fourthly, you say there's a million different arguments in the AC. Again, you can broadly phrase your arguments. There's no strategy. You also the strategy I waste for me because it's a game over issue. For me, I just have a chance to meet your interpretation because you don't even have counter interpretation. You say first my interpretation is the correct interpretation. For me to predict you go for bidirectional theory arguments against all the time. Second, you say there's abuse between then you lose. This argument does not make sense because the framing interpretation of whether or not you get access to these arguments in the first place. Thirdly, you say that like permutation, someone's or why there's other rectification that you have a 6 minute 2 minute but you can have two speeches. You have the ability to weigh against those arguments. You also can see the predictability standard that I predict the topic, not about theory. So you prefer my arguments because they're more predictable. That's the starts the case. This outweighs his show because the meta theory issue because it comes before the view story and his show because the question whether or not you're able to evaluate them in the versatility of shows. These shows are pretty terrible. Dispositionality, counter-disposition, then counter-plan disposition. This keep check back perms. I can't to keep check back every perm becomes no risk issue for him because he can always collapse to it in the 2NR. Also, that means I lose all my offense as well. So it means I don't have defense. He just said I can extend that benefit, but every perm becomes no risk issue. This creates a structural advantage for him because he has unreciprocal layer for me because I can't read perms to the app. I would just have to read counter-plan, at which point they would still bite his interpretation. It's a key to check the ground. He just says time strategy that's his fault for making defense to be actually have guts to go for straight turns. This would not be an issue. Second, counterplan. The second interpretation doesn't make any sense for this specific counter interpretation. Is that I don't have to. I may read the narrow standard. I may read the narrow standard, and if you're exercise advocacy solves means there's no use in this specific case. Because I specifically said this is contextualization for simplicity. Means that clearly we can read the standard. He just says that there's always that benefit of the interpretation. Beforehand, he reads the reinterpretation of the standard. There is a cross-examination that he could read that interpretation for future generations. Means that there's no ability for him to solve for any of the benefits that he's able to solve for his abilities. Also means that there's a net loss of clarity in this interpretation. Means I'm able to lose. It's really easy. The plan with spelling errors. You can't do that in the TOC. Jurisdiction comes first, not meta theory second. It's not my ability to gauge the theory debate.
And Prasad 121.
Okay.
What were his arguments why jurisdiction comes first?
The argument was it engages the ballot on a prior level that even if there's a structural skew, you can't vote aff because there is no stable conception of affirmative. Because he's not affirming.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like, you literally cannot vote for the affirmative. There is no affirmative in this debate. So, first off, let's talk about technically. Technically, this 2NR was good, right? He stumbled a little bit when he got to the meta theory show at the bottom of the NC. But, I mean, ultimately, we're just nitpicking here.
Yeah, he got through a lot.
He got through a lot, and this is what I mean by you don't have to be technically perfect. You just have to be technically good enough. And Chris was most definitely technically good enough. In fact, he was technically way above average.
Right.
The second thing is, notice how Chris does not go for too much. A great example of going for too much in this debate would have been also going for substance.
Right.
So our conversation prior to the 2NR was, would Chris go for substance? Should Chris go for substance? And Chris conclusively decides not to.
Right.
He knows that the 2AR is going to be all in on theory, which means that he's going to go all in on theory first.
Right.
Now, notice how, even though he doesn't go for too much, he gives himself two ways out, two legitimate ways out. One is plan flaw, one is meta theory.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so this is valuable because now the 2AR is bifurcated. It needs to beat back both of those layers, and additionally needs to win offense to one of his shells.
Right, like Chris put some like red herring on his shells because like even though Rom probably would be ahead if he simply rescinded the arguments like on the shell, like he still put responsive. He didn't just like not
exactly.
respond.
And so it's really vital that last minute he blitzed him on the shells.
Right.
Right? Ideally, if Chris had been a tiny bit more efficient, he could have gotten 2-3 arguments out against each of the shells more.
Sure.
Right? Because that really puts the 2AR under a lot more pressure as well.
Uh-huh.
Now, I think the other big substantive note that needs to happen is Chris does a fantastic job explaining why there's no new 2AR weighing on jurisdiction versus fairness.
Right, yeah, it's like the argument that we talked about. Like, he had a chance to do the 1 hour weighing, but he chose not to, which means that
means that you need to default here.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is important because if this argument is won, if I accept this argument, that means jurisdiction definitely comes first.
Right.
Right? Then it's just a question of, is jurisdiction a reason to vote? And if it is, I vote neg. Mm-hmm. Right? This round is really simple now. It's very clear that this AF is flawed in terms of the plan text.
Sure.
Right? The violation is not up for debate. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the impact? Is the impact to vote Rom down or to revalue the debate under whole res?
Yeah.
If Rom can win that impact level analysis, he comes out ahead.
Right.
Now, this is where, coming back to the 1AR, we talked about how if the 1AR had read one shell less and instead had weighed more between jurisdiction and fairness, that would have been really useful.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Additionally, in this round, now we're going to see whether or not the 2AR leverages substance. It doesn't seem like substance was relevant.
Right, yeah.
Like, that 1AR could have probably been 4 minutes on theory. Right? That 1AR spending the last 50 seconds on substance backfired on the app because the hope was that the negative would invest time on substance. Yeah, and in this case, the negative made a very brilliant strategic decision and chose not to.
Sure. Yeah.
So far, Chris has made a grand total of 0 mistakes strategically in this debate. Mm-hmm. 0. His NC was as close to perfect as you'll get strategically, and his 2NR was as close to perfect as you'll get as well. Mm-hmm. So Chris nailed all of his strategic decisions, and even though he's less technical and less fast than Rom, that puts him in a fantastic position to win this round.
Sure.
Now, Rom strategically may have made a blunder. He definitely has made a blunder by not weighing earlier in the debate between his shells and the T shell and the plan flaw. Right? That weighing definitely should have been there. Additionally, I think Rom really probably made a mistake by going for substance for 50 seconds. The benefit of going for substance, again, is that if you win substance, it can often act as a tiebreaker on theory, right? I.e., if you collapse the debate out of theory and go for substance, then you win on substance.
Yeah, but that's really rare for Rom because he probably just collapses the 2AR on theory.
Well, now, so let's analyze this. Walking into this 2AR, Rom does have the tiebreaker.
Right.
So if he was to try to activate the tiebreaker or go for it, the way he would do it is he would beat back plan flaw, he would beat back meta theory, and then just go for substance.
Right. He doesn't have to win it. Yeah. Oh, that's true. He doesn't have to beat back any of the arguments that Chris made. But I think it's better strategic trade-off for Chris, time trade-off for Chris, because like he spent like 50 seconds in the 1 AR, which is about almost like 33% of his time in on substance, while like Chris just spent like 16% of his time because around like 50 seconds on his 2 shells.
Yeah. So it's really interesting now. I think also the reason that in this case that tiebreaker is not as useful is because there's a clear violation on plan flaw.
Sure. Oh, right. But then he can simply question the impact of jurisdiction. I think that also works, right?
Yeah, that's true. So this 2AR has outs. This 2AR can either go for one of his shells and weigh, and in that case, he needs to weigh both against meta theory and against jurisdiction.
And he has to respond to the arguments why he
can't weigh. Yes, exactly. Or this 2AR can try to win terminal defense on plan flaw and win terminal defense on meta theory and then go for substance.
Sure.
And that substantive debate will be really easy. Now, the problem there is winning terminal D is hard, especially when you don't have a counter interp on plan flaw saying plan flaw good.
Right, yeah.
Right? So you have to either change the status of the voter. That's basically all he has left for himself. His only out on plan flaw is changing the status of the voter. But I want to reiterate again the importance of substance here, right? Substance does afford the 2AR now a new out.
Right.
Which is it can just try to collapse the debate back down to substance.
Right.
So whoever controls substance ends up controlling who ends up having a strategic out that is now available to them.
Right.
If you control the direction of substance, then you don't have to win theory anymore. You just have to make it go away. That's really important to know.
Sure.
So in terms of order of operations, what this does is it changes the order of operations for the debater who has won substance. It's no longer the case that they have to actively win offense to theory and win the round on theory. They can just win defense on theory or like more offense to a counter interp and collapse it back down to substance because substance flows their way.
Right.
A great example of this is like the 2NR between Noah and Bob, right? Where Noah clearly was winning substance, and so now he just had to collapse the debate back down to substance. And so he could throw the kitchen sink at him.
Right.
He could read everything in the box. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what do you think this 2AR is going to do?
Let me see. I think Chris made more arguments on the first shell than the second shell that Rom read. So I think that even though second shell is less true than first shell, I think it's better for Rom to go for the second shell, and then I would have to do the jurisdiction versus fairness weighing, and then respond to meta theory, and yeah.
Okay, so Chris makes it hard on Rom because Chris spends 230 on jurisdiction and 230 on meta theory, which means that essentially Chris split his time evenly down both of his options that can win him the debate. Okay, so let's see what Rom does.
121. You just said jurisdiction versus that meta theory. In the speech, you said meta theory outweighs. What's the deal?
I think jurisdiction is the voting issue, but meta theory perceived more shells and
Can I?
voter.
Okay, fine. It's going to be a short overview on theory, then, can I get my shelf back? Extension, substance, then his shells, in the order of plan flaws, and the underview that he extended. Overview, extension of substance, then shells in the order of plan flaw, and the underview that he extends out of, let's see. It'll be really short, yeah. Okay. Right. Never write it attention. Oh no, you can. Don't have to write it down. Alright, so everybody ready? Chris never actually gets away jurisdiction fairness. He thinks that fairness and education are what is why solve all of these the jurisdiction claiming, especially the competing in terms of norms, creation, in terms of future, around that you can still want the fairness office down with the counter interpretations are also extensive enough to see the Randall argument. So, it's by me, both these shows. So, extended counter increase that I don't have to, so I'm willing to clarify and change in cross-examination to me, being consistent in active policy. He is number one. Response is not to some extent. He says I can ship that totally non-responsive. That you would choose it for me, that I would make it consistent with what you want me to found, which solves all of the ups and downs of the jurisdiction. It's not matter of fact, I can ship this, no impact in terms of fairness. I've mitigated all your in terms of jurisdiction. Inspired that if you told me about these plan clauses and processes, we could have fixed it because you obviously know the plan. So maybe if I know the point is that we would just fix that process, that would give the judge something to vote for. He's conceded 3 reasons why this outweighs except the number 1 point, which that outweighs the risk of offensive reason why I vote for you to the impacts on the nip of my counter recently back to fairness. It's still offensive because he's fairness is a voter. He's conceded I solve 100% of the options. Really no risk of a negative offense on this question. He conceded I just would have done it in process. I gave him my guarantee hand on my heart that I would have changed the form and process. His only response to that it's a plan that I should have no bias. And even though like I cannot be expected to pick every single possibility or plan flaw with the plan that I chose. Like, there are millions of things that you involve over inside the court over. I referencing court as I ever looked at this plan since Harvard. The reason why you should err after the pieces that I just would have changed the form and solved 100% of abuse. Very basic cross-sex checks. These are the only arguments that I can ship. That is not responsible. That you would shift it for me. And that's a very interesting that I should be allowed to ship. So if there are two conceded reasons, number 1 point outweighs in deterrence. You would only read theory. I suppose checker for this, you like to make a lot of index about me. You are the one who was the dumbest shell in course that teach about a plan while the applicant couldn't even gauge the absence of a generic term. This is agreements was the number 1 outweighs on deterrence that you'd only read theory or this shell in case where there is attributes case where I refuse to do. He's also said that outweighs in terms of infinite abuse and to be pointed out as where this is the net goal of theory to begin with that we should be able to debate. That means you just read theory as a strategic advantage. Number 2 that outweighs in terms of education, which last year to get more adventures of that is that solves now is off now on the line lines. Number 1 says I pick from 3 there's no ceasefire and number 2 says it's only lay back to parents. It's not matter if I solve 100% of offense back to jurisdiction, then the link to parents is what you have. Also, he never does comparison. You should default to that fairness outweighs in terms of time for checks in this round are vital. You're going to have mitigation on the jurisdiction board. Why I'm actually not the unintended reason why fairness outweighs in terms of strength of the link. You have completed our benefits of fairness outweighs. You must be able to adjudicate around fairly. But I have defense on jurisdiction. Go to the defense of jurisdiction. He says the impact of time going away. He needs to see the number 1 plus framed as terminal. He says his argument is totally an unwarranted search. There's literally no reason why you have a decision vote about when you vote on bad and unwarranted arguments all the time. That's conceded terminal takes the jurisdiction. I mean, not possibly acts for leverage any impact of jurisdiction. He said I can plan a he dependent plan unconditionally, but one is Strat's argument totally new. Second, my argument that if you are with your shell, it's enough just by I should have to now go to the second shell. This interpretation is absolutely terrible. Sentence number 1, I need an exact counter interpretation. This is not raised as an introvert offensive voting issue. This is conceded take up the statistics reason to reject both of the interpretations. He said number 1 response that it's not because it's an offensive issue or a voting issue. You should not treat it as such in the 2R. So I will link a number 1 point strategy that I cannot check choose pick interpretation. He said it's worse to the he said the 8 point, which the next piece is always worse than the framing issue, which impacts all of his arguments on the line. This does not matter if you win any direct love. He said the next piece is always worse than I don't know. The name spec the number 1, 2, 3 should always response to my arguments that even if you can make it narrow, I wouldn't know that. So vote on stuff. I'm beating both the
Okay. Technically, Rom was one of the best, if not the best.
Sure, yeah.
That was fantastic. That was really good technically. There was not a single stumble. There was not a single efficiency problem. And he's very concise. He's getting through arguments super fast. Strategically, he probably overinvests on plan flaw and underinvests on meta theory.
What was the implication to the meta theory, though? Was it so rejected? Or rejected presumably, right?
Yeah, that's how, I mean, presumably if the 1AR shells are rejected debater, then the meta theory is as well, right? Now, this argument that Rom gets to at the end is the crucial argument about neg abuse outweighs af abuse. But the problem is Chris has ink on this debate. And Chris makes arguments about how you have 2 speeches to weigh, I only have 1.
Okay.
Right? Those are arguments that the 2AR definitely needs to be giving lip service to. And like Chris gives a really great example about how like you can't go for the RVI because the 2AR will go for either shell. Arguments like that. Those are just arguments that I think Rom is just misallocating time here.
Sure.
So I think the better split here would have been 90 seconds plan flaw, 80 seconds meta theory, 10 seconds extension of substance, and explaining why that's enough for him to win the round. Now, it's really interesting to note that obviously Rom understands debate at a high level, right? Because what I was saying prior to the 2AR is that a smart 2AR would not need necessarily to go for one of his shells. Yeah. Now that he has the tiebreaker, he just has to collapse the debate back down to substance.
Exactly.
But now, what Rom did is he put himself in the position of a nib. Right? And so let's compare a hypothetical where Ron just gave this 2AR versus where he gave a 2AR in which he went for one of his shells and then weighed it. In a world where he weighs it, he can win offense against both of the shells and lose the line by line on those shells, but still win the debate.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right? So he's not put in a position where he has to win the line by line on both of those debates.
Oh, yeah.
All he has to do is win the weighing against both of those debates. So a drastically different 2AR could have looked like 60 seconds winning one of his shells, 60 seconds weighing his shell against both of Chris's shells, and then 30 seconds on plan flaw, 30 seconds on meta theory.
Right. Also, I don't think that Ron particularly answered the argument. Like, you don't get to weigh in the 2AR. He makes a lot of arguments why jurisdiction, why fairness, like, solves the jurisdiction claims, but it's not the warrant. I don't really understand the warrant behind that claim.
Yeah. I mean, I thought his 2AR was really good. I think, like, I don't know if Chris actually really responded to the argument that there's no reason you have to vote on jurisdiction. You vote on bad arguments all the time. Now, the thing for Rom that I think is not going to help him here is that these arguments became magically clearer in the 2AR.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't flow those arguments in the 1AR. Yeah.
Right. If I had him flowed as such in the 1AR, it would be much more persuasive for me to come to 2AR. And what the 2AR is saying makes a ton of sense, but it's just not how I have the 1AR written down.
Exactly.
And that's problematic for Ron. And so this shows, again, the value of how you can be too fast.
Right.
Especially on a technical line-by-line debate.
Sure.
So in terms of redoing this debate, I think that the 2NR really actually should have included jurisdiction versus fairness weighing, and that is, Rom is right that the 2NR does make that mistake. I think that the 2NR makes one weighing argument about like the structural skew argument, right? Like even if there's structural skew, his AF doesn't affirm. But I think you can also make arguments about like predictability. Like jurisdiction is the foundational mechanism by which both debaters understand how the judge votes and doesn't vote. As soon as we start destroying notions of judge jurisdiction, the interventionist and the predictability of a decision drastically simultaneously increases and decreases, i.e. intervention increases, but probability of understanding the decision decreases.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So explaining why jurisdiction at a meta level impacts back to fairness.
Right.
Now, I think it's important on theory debates for you to be able to execute the way Rom did, in that conciseness and lack of stumbling.
Sure. Yeah.
Rom moves through issues really fast. Right?
Yeah.
He's not giving full sentences. He's giving the claim version of the sentence, so like when he's extending it.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so this is something that Jackson was also incredible at. And we'll watch a debate with Jackson where he does this. Jackson, I think, was a little bit more comprehensive in explaining the argument, but both of them were at this speed.
Sure.
So in a way, Rom actually has practiced this so much that he knows all these arguments by heart.
Yeah.
Right? Sure. Like he's so familiar with this lingo that he doesn't need to think about it very much. It just naturally flows for him.
Yeah.
One second, let me. So, in terms of a redo, let's talk about what needs to be redone. I think the 2NR was essentially perfect. I think where the 2NR could have tried to improve is improving its efficiency a little bit to get out more arguments against both the shells that Rom goes for. And in addition, doing weighing between jurisdiction and fairness.
Wait, but now I think about it, if he goes for the other two shells, right, he should at least devote some time to he should at least like devote some time to substance, because like he if he spends like the time on the two shells, that allows the 2AR to simply collapse out of the two shells and win.
Right, but then if he doesn't go for the two shells, the 2AR goes for
right. Yeah.
Well, then the 2AR says there's full strength of link on both of these shells, which means that even if the two shells that Chris says comes first do come first, if it's strength of link times strength of impact, he's just winning strength of impact, I'm winning strength of link. Let's compare the two.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So do you see how the 2AR sort of has, 2NR has to bite a bullet here? It has to choose.
Yeah,
Ideally, what the 2NR could have done is spent 20 seconds on substance,
Right. Yeah.
explaining why the Randall arguments don't link, and muddling it.
Sure. Yeah.
So write this down. So the 2NR on our redo is going to mimic what Chris did, but it's going to include jurisdiction versus fairness weighing that's more explicit than just the one argument that's extended. And it is going to also try to get out 1 to 2 more arguments on each of the shells that Rom read. And ideally, you can do this in 540 so that you have 20 seconds left for substance. Then, the 2AR redo needs to allocate time differently. Rom spends close to about 220, 215 on plan flaw and 45 on meta theory. It needs to be about 90-90.
Sure. Yeah. Or do you want the different version of the redo where he instead goes for the theory and then weighs that against?
We're going to do both versions. So one is I want to do the version Rom gave.
Sure.
Just so you can practice that time allocation better. So 90 seconds on plan flaw, 90 seconds on meta theory, and so I guess it should be 85-85 because then you have 10 seconds to explain how winning substance means you just have to win defense on both of those shells.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. The second version of the redo I want you to give for Rom, the speech, is going 60 seconds on one of the 2 shells, then 60 seconds weighing one shell against both of those shells again. The shell you go for against both of the arguments that Chris goes for. So weighing it against meta theory and weighing it against plan flaw.
Wait, can you repeat the redo version too?
Yeah. So first 60 seconds are winning one of your shells. Next 30 seconds is weighing your shell against plan flaw, specifically fairness versus jurisdiction. Next 30 seconds is weighing your shell versus meta theory. Next 30 seconds is defense on plan flaw. Ideally, you go for the argument that there's no reason judges care about jurisdiction. And you also go for an argument that, like, CX solves.
Yeah, his
Yeah. Then 30 seconds on meta theory. And on meta theory, you should go for the argument that, like, this should be an explicit interp if you wanted me to vote on. If you wanted, like, this should have been phrased as an explicit interp in the one end if it's going to be a voting issue. And the second argument that should be gone for is maintaining afflex is key. So neg abuse outweighs aff abuse, that, like, you don't know what's abusive until it happens.
Sure.
Right? And this is where I think you need to make an argument that, like, Chris is saying things like, tell me converse, et cetera, et cetera. But the shells Chris that Rom's reading is about status of the CP, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to devote time in the 1AC to the status of the CP because you don't even know if the neg is going to read the CP.
Right. Oh, yeah. Plus, there's going to be, like, infinite number of practices and the negative like, I think his infinite abuse argument is simply true. Like, there's even if I include, like, all the theory paradigm there is, you can simply, like, cherry pick and, like, read a super abusive strategy and then have no recourse against that.
Exactly. Yeah. And you should point out, like, the examples that Chris pinpoints don't affect this round.
Sure.
Like, Chris pinpoints converse. Converse doesn't influence status of CP. Okay, so I think both of these redos are fantastic drills to do. All 3 of these redos are fantastic drills to do. The redo of the 2NR focuses on better time allocation, and is also, like, Chris gave as close to a perfect speech as you can give in real time on that debate, so just mimicking that. The second redo focuses on being as technical as Rom was, but changing time allocation a tiny bit. And third redo focuses on conceptually reorienting the way the 2AR approaches the debate and seeing how that works out.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Cool.